Hi, everyone. I am so happy you're here with us for this week's Conversation with Leaders Cultivating Connection. Today, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Elyse Dub about the business case for building culture and connection. If we haven't met, I'm Julie Campbell, founder and CEO of Center Stage Connections and off-Broadway actor turned confidence whisperer to leaders, experts, and students who find themselves needing to speak in high stakes moments, but need a repeatable strategy to speak more confidently, concisely, and in their authentic voice and style. Today, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Elyse Dub, who I had the privilege of being in a workshop with that was absolutely transformative. I'm going to introduce her and we're going to jump right into our conversation. Dr. Elyse Dub is a licensed psychologist with over 2 decades of experience working across the lifespan in both public and private settings. She is the founder of Insight Onsite, a mental wellness company focused on addressing unprecedented levels of stress, burnout, and work-life imbalance that impacts the business bottom lines. Dr. Dub partners with organizations to support employee mental well-being through workshops, keynotes, and facilitated group conversations, which provide real-world strategies for the life challenges that impact employee engagement, innovation, and retention. Dr. Dub brings a human-centered, psychologically informed perspective into organizations to help build a strong and resilient company culture. So, Elyse, welcome to the conversation. I'm so happy that you're here.
Julie, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Let's jump right in. We've talked for a little bit. I'm excited to have this conversation, and I'm going to ask you right off the bat, why is culture the new, or matters a lot more, not the new bottom line, but certainly matters more as a business bottom line? Can you take a little bit deeper dive on this for us, please?
Great. I certainly will. So I'm just going to throw out a couple of data points that I find to be really interesting. When we look at surveys from last year from Gallup, we see a couple of really interesting numbers. First of all, I think the number hovers right around 88% of people believe in culture. That's number one. When we see strong cultures, we see that people are 4 times more productive. The third piece of data that I want to share is that people nowadays, in this time, to 2025, 2026, people would be willing to take a 10% pay cut if it meant that they were going to be in a place with a stronger culture. That to me was a mic dropping statistic that I understood. People care about being in workplaces that they can feel good being in.
That's quite a statistic you got there. There you go. That supports your work, supports my work. Connection matters. We know that intuitively, but it's good when we have the data and the science to back it up.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this word culture. So culture matters for the business bottom line, but that's a broad word.
Yes.
Can you unpack that about? So how do we get to the culture part of that? How does that happen?
That's a great question. And as a psychologist, which is what my background is, I'm always looking at root causes. How do we build culture? And I think we have to start in many ways at the beginning. And that's the work that you do, and it's the work that I do. And that's about connection and relationships. So the question that I always have with the work that I do with Insight Onsite is, how are we going to build relationships? How are we going to have unique ways in which people can have the opportunity to connect with one another? And at Insight Onsite, we have defined that around 3 primarily different areas where I get people to work in groups and I get them talking about the stuff that impacts our ability to do our jobs. Apolitical topics such as stress, work-life balance, and often some caregiving responsibilities. And clearly, that also goes into areas such as burnout as well, especially when we're talking about stress. So I think that that's the root cause for me. It's about these relationships. We build the relationships, we build the trust, we build the culture.
Absolutely. Relationships are the key to all of that. It's pretty straightforward, really, when you talk about it. Our
Mm.
people want to work and be with in their lives with people who they feel connected to. And we're not saying it has to be all the same stuff
Mhm.
that you're connected to as a friend. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I know what you don't propose that everyone become besties at
Mhm.
work. You have words that you use for that, and if you can kind of put that together, put that out there, I would love to hear that again.
Right. So, a couple of things that this reminds me of, and when we think about work and we look again at data, I think the number is something throughout our lifetime, we're going to spend upwards of 105,000 hours at work.
Okay.
Work, right. So, let's take a moment to just think about how large that number is. Work is a place where, for many people, we're working in organizations where maybe we have similar interests. Similar interests drew us to that organization, or similar values or similar beliefs. Okay, so that's the first place that I want to start in having that conversation. And secondly, a lot of times when we're having conversations, we think on ends of a continuum. And this is going to be something I know that you and I are going to circle back to. Office besties is one kind of a relationship. That may not be the relationship for everyone. You may find your best friend at work, you may not. At Inside Onsite, when we get people talking with one another, what we're really looking to do is to build relationships based upon mutual respect and also understanding. Those, again, talk about root causes and foundations. Those are the foundations for building trust and for building that ability to have psychological safety at work.
I love that. Mutual respect and understanding. That's a good thing for work and life in general, but particularly that's where you come from. And
Right.
this idea of building those relationships, the reality is that we do have a lot of virtual work, we have hybrid work, what have you. And um, the word siloed often comes up,
Mhm.
whether we're remote or whether we're in even in an office space.
Yes.
And I know that your work tries to kind of cut through that, and
Mhm.
then and to bring it together. So can you talk a little bit about, I think you've really articulated why people need this. If you
Mhm.
could talk any more about that, that would be great. But also give me an idea of the three top things that you are hearing are the top stressors for any of us that is on our minds
Mhm.
while we're at work.
Great. So I'm going to kind of unravel some of that a little bit. Today, we're working in very different ways than we have in the past. I always talk about it. It was typical that people went into offices 5 days a week. You had conversations around the water cooler. Things look
Mhm.
very differently now with remote first and hybrid and people being in offices full time. So, on some level, we need to change the way in which we think about relationships. That's the first part of it. And at Inside Onsite, what we do is we meet organizations where they are. We will do groups virtually, we will do groups in person, and we will meet that organization where they are. So, in terms of the question about the top three areas that I see as being challenging, is the topics that organizations are asking me to talk about and to facilitate groups on. The three are stress. That's the top one. Businesses care that their people are stressed. The other, as all of us are trying to navigate this idea about work life balance, but I think that's a term from well over 100 years ago. That notion of balance, the same way that I had talked earlier about office besties, we need to change and reframe some of the language because it doesn't look like balance. And
Mm.
then the third area that often I run groups on within organizations is around some type of caregiving. And I always put the caveat is we think caregiving, and a lot of times that's synonymous with parenting. That may not be the case. Sometimes the caregiving groups that I run are based upon caring for a parent or caring for a loved one in some way. ways. And my most favorite group that I just ran recently within an organization was caregiving for yourself. And the topic was people who were living alone for the first time or in a long time. So when that group within the organization got together, I had very young people in the group, somewhere that were just starting out entry level positions with 20 some odd year old with 60-year-olds in the group. So there was this multi-generational, beautiful conversation that happened as people were building relationships. They were solving the challenges that impact ability to do their job. And they were also meeting other people that they may not have had access to within the organization. And it was a really wonderful group and some really good connections. And on some level, networking happened within that group too.
That makes complete sense. Elise, I love that. That's a really specific and valuable way to get that those connections in that networking going within a workplace, to have those two generations. That's a big conversation happening right now because of how much our world has changed technologically. But what can we learn from each other when we come from those different places? That's a fabulous reason to bring your work in. That's
Yes,
great.
yes,
I didn't know about that particular
yeah.
workshop that you offer. That's terrific. Can you talk to me a little bit then about, can you give me a couple of nuggets? I'm all about the sticky story nuggets. So I love the anecdotes and the things that our audience members might be interested in saying, yeah, okay, hey, but what does this look like if I bring you into my office? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I want to actually start, and I know, Julie, in our prior conversations, we had talked about the name of my business, Inside
Mm,
Onsite. And really, and I think this is going to frame how I'm going to answer the question. Originally, when I started the business, I thought this was the Inside Onsite. I was going to come in. I'm a psychologist. I've worked in a lot of different ways. It was going to be about my insight, bringing it into organizations. What I noticed really quickly in doing these groups or in giving talks about work-life balance or giving talks about new parenting or whatever it was, is that the individuals in the group had so much knowledge and knowledge that they were eager to share amongst themselves or share with one another. So the Inside Onsite really became about the insight that if you look to the right of you and you look to the left of you, your colleagues have. So
mm.
that really frames a lot of the discussions. And really, again, what my focus is in the groups, and that typically what I do is I run groups that meet for about 6 or 8 sessions. And the goal is always to get people talking to one another, to help provide one another with strategies. All the strategies provided may not be for you, but if you walk away with 1 or 2 nuggets, you're going to be golden. It's going to be a really good ROI on that investment of time. And we talk about the things that impact our ability. Again, apolitical topics. We talk about stress. We're all stressed. We talk about work-life balance. That is something that many, many, many of us are navigating. And again, the third topic is caregiving. These are the 3 big topics that we have. And some of those nuggets, some of the pieces of information that I've had from the groups that I have done is that I had 2 C-suite leaders in a group. There were also administrative assistants in a group because we were talking about stress. And one person, the chief technology officer, said to me privately, he's like, I've been trying to get into meetings with this individual who is in more sales and marketing, and I haven't always felt so comfortable approaching them. Because of your group, I am now more comfortable approaching this person and advocating for my team. Bingo. That's exactly what happened. Another conversation was I had 2 people within an organization had similar experiences. One person said to another, had never met before my group, let's take this conversation offline. I have a lot of information I'd like to share with you. That was
Mm.
another major, major win because, again, we're looking to build those relationships, mutual respect and understanding, and then follow through on those relationships, given the amount of time we spend at work.
I love that. I love so much about what you said, but specifically what stands out to me is that your work brings together all the all the tiers or the layers of leadership within an organization. You have the C-suite, and you have coming in and participating in the same room with admins. Because one of the things that I find in my work as well, if I'm doing team workshops, is there's sometimes a sense from leadership,
Mhm.
if they see that their team is needing some professional development, or if they say they want to bring you in. I don't know if you've seen this, but what sometimes happens is I'll get a leader saying, "Oh no, this is for my team. I don't need to participate."
Mhm.
And I like to challenge them on that, because what you're building here is a way of communicating, and it's a way of building those relationships, building connection, and building trust.
Yes.
And when you see a leader who is interested and engaged and feels like this is valuable to be a part of that, kind of a equal part of what's happening there, I would
Mhm.
imagine that trust factor goes way up.
Absolutely. And I think too is that we're all in this together. When Julie and I actually initially met, we were talking about a framework that I had developed around authenticity. And one of the big pieces that when I think about teamworks and I think about what your exact point, leaders saying, this is for my team, not for me. We are all in this together. If we can start thinking a little bit more about how we all do this, to your exact point, you build those relationships, you build those trust, you build that understanding. And I would really guess, and I feel very strongly about this, is that that leader who then attends will walk away with nuggets much more than they had ever expected. Nuggets of
Ab-
wisdom about their people.
Absolutely. It's funny with the word authenticity. When I was in your workshop, I after like probably about a minute, I felt like a bobblehead, because and I almost feel like I'm probably being too distracting to Elise, because the more you talk, the more I was nodding along like this, and I went, oh my God, I gotta like not be such a bobblehead. And I do that even in these because in interviews like this, because I'm like, yeah, I'm with you, I get it.
Mhm.
So yes to all of that authenticity.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit, because I know that when we're talking about leaders too, that there's a lot of conversation out there right now about leaders showing up with more vulnerability. I'm using air quotes here for that
Mhm.
vulnerability thing. And for a couple of reasons. One, vulnerability means something very different to each of us,
Yes.
and how we choose to step into that. And it also may feel a little bit intimidating, or it might feel leaders might feel some pressure,
Mhm.
particularly if they are coming into a workshop like this. Can you talk to me a little bit about how what you've seen in that way, or how you help kind of move through that?
Absolutely. And I love that you bring up this topic of vulnerability because to me, in talking with leaders, it's one of those really scary topics. I don't need this.
Mm.
This is for everybody else, right? It can feel really, really scary. But when we think about vulnerability, the same way that we talked earlier about relationships, it's not office besties. We talked about work life balance, it's not work life balance anymore. The same thing about vulnerability. And really, my two big takeaways that I hope that leaders will pull from this is to think about being very intentional about your sharing.
Mm.
Meaning, this is that think about what vulnerability means to you and then to share in a way that is appropriate. You will come across, share in a way that you feel is appropriate for you. And I'm going to give an example in a moment. What I think happens then is that when you share in a way that is comfortable for you, people get to see that and it will feel authentic. And as the leader, and then that starts to trickle down to others. I'm going to give a great example. I was running a workshop again. We were talking about stress and we were talking about what do you do when you only have a few minutes and you really recognize your stress. That was kind of the topic for this group. And the one of the leaders within that organization, he had said something that I thought was incredibly powerful. He's like, when I'm at that point, I put on my headphones and I just blast music for a few moments. And for him, that was a very vulnerable share. And I always say, it's not about sharing your deep, dark secrets. This is, again, how you define it. And this was intentional. And what I loved about it is that when I watched the people that were on his team who were working for him, they looked at him like, oh, wow. There was that wonderful stunned look, and he felt good about how he
Mhm.
shared that. And again, it wasn't this kind of thing that was deep dark, but it was intentional sharing on his part. And it went a long, long way.
Yes, that word intention. Yeah, speaking with intention.
Speaking with intention and thinking about too, it's the intention and defining what these things mean for you, and then to be in alignment, living out your values around these things. And if we can take some time to think that through, I think that we come across to others in a very, very different way.
Absolutely. And what's interesting too that I found in my own work when I'm choosing to share, or when I'm in a workshop, leading a workshop where others are sharing, that it's funny. It's sometimes, and you have to, as you mentioned, you have to choose your level of sharing,
Yes.
whether it's going to be TMI or what have you. But what I've often found from people when they do take that teeny little bit of risk, that very often the ripple effect of that is way more than the person who's speaking it could ever have imagined. I don't want to speak for the leader that you mentioned there with when they shared that moment, but that at that in that moment, as you said, probably felt very vulnerable to that person in sharing that. And
Mhm.
then the but then when you see the light bulb moments happen for the rest of the people in the room, you realize, hmm, that really wasn't such a big deal that I put that out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And the ROI on that is you just built some more connection there
Yep.
and a little bit more trust
Mhm.
that you're human like the rest of us, even though you're a leader here. I love that example.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was rewarding, I was rewarding for all the people, for myself included. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It was a really special moment, and then, again, there were some other really good ramifications that were shared with me privately after that. Um, and again, putting this in your own terms, defining it for yourself is going to make you feel more comfortable wherever it is that you are coming from.
And I think what you do, Elise, because again, I was part of one of your workshops, you have just a very calm but direct way of setting up these workshops,
Mhm.
setting the boundaries in a way that everyone feels very comfortable and
Mhm.
everyone feels, I don't want to overuse that word safe.
Mhm.
But I know that that's important. I don't mean to throw that
Sure.
away, but for some people that's like, oh, that may seem
Mhm.
like a strange word, but you really truly do. You have a very unique way of saying this is how we're going to structure this, and people really kind of come to those moments feeling like they can truly be who they are, which is what you're advocating for. So setting that up in your workshops, I'm sure is just you have is important to you, and you do
Yes.
that. I can totally vouch for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It is really important. Most importantly is my goal is to get people talking to one another, get people talking to one another and problem solving together. There are, I'm not saying this is not a replacement for therapy. This is another way in which we just share strategies and we just learn something new about one another. And what does that lead to? Greater innovation, greater creativity. This is a retention issue too. When people feel connected at work, they stay at work. It's one of the big mantras for Insight On Site. And
Mhm.
this becomes something that is really important for business bottom lines.
And you had a great statistic that we had in another conversation where you said you had some uh, data points on the cost, the when people do have to take some time off if they're
Mhm,
feeling stressed, or
mhm.
the cost of replacing someone if they
Yeah,
feel like they can't really show up. You want to tuck that in there while we start to wrap up?
absolutely. So the number, which I think is probably even a little low, is around $300 billion from avoidable absenteeism
Oof.
because of stress, because of physical and mental health challenges. Again, we're not going to solve for all of it, and I don't want this to come across as a panacea for all of it, but we're all doing our part in this. And I feel like, especially around that avoidable absenteeism and the stress number, when people start to recognize through the groups, like, what does it mean when I feel stressed? What are some of the things I can do? We start learning some strategies. We start to protect against that number.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Yeah.
have
And,
people who are
go
more
ahead.
engaged and able to show up at work.
Right. And I want to emphasize something that you mentioned earlier, that what you're talking about is not therapy. That I
No.
had a coaching friend who really drove the distinction, who said, therapy is about kind of looking back in some ways to kind of sort through the things, whereas training and coaching is about moving forward. What's next?
Mhm,
And that's really what your work does, is it helps
mhm.
people come to a place so that they can move forward and move forward in a way that they feel productive and authentic, and they're not disconnected from everyone that's along
Mhm.
with them for that that's along for the ride at work.
Right, right. And too, I just want to close on this part too. And the groups we do with Inside Onsite, they're structured groups. I facilitate the groups in many of the situations, and it just becomes a way to interact and to talk with your colleagues in a structured way, which can be different than lunches or get-togethers after work or any of those other times that are more unstructured. This gets to meaningful conversation where we solve for business challenges in a way that is structured. And for all the groups I do, they are completely voluntary.
Love that, Elise. If there's anything else you want to add before we wrap up, I'm happy to hear that. And otherwise, please let people know where they can find you so they can bring your fabulous workshops into their workplaces.
Great. I really just want to close by saying, Julie, I thank you, thank you, thank you. This was wonderful to do this with you and to problem solve and to figure this out and to just have really good conversation with you. So I thank you for that. And I can be reached on my website, www.insight, INSIGHT, onsite, ONSITE.org.
Terrific. Thank you, Elise. This has been a pleasure. You always make me think. You always get me more energized for the work that I do. And I just really appreciate you having this conversation with me today.
All right, great. Julie, thank you again.
Be well.
You too.